Hey there, Myeth of Magick, doing another vlog. Still working on that video, the intro video. Actually trying to write exploration of ego and ego death. I've been looking at a lot of videos on YouTube lately, and it's very interesting. Our ego, right, is sort of implanted there or formed or crystallized over time by the sublimated trauma in our unconscious mind, right? That's the most simplest explanation. It's a little bit more, in depth than that, but I've been interested in knowing what our ego is, why it's created, why we have this part of ourself inside of ourself that is basically like a closed system, an internal closed system, and how it's formed by these by society in general, by our upbringing, by our beliefs, how these things form this closed system inside of ourselves, and what happens to the energy that gets lost in that closed system. And I've found that we create this closed system or energy build up so that things can feed off of it. And that's kind of important to understand, that we are basically food for kleptotic beings, which it sounds scary and paranoid, but at the same time, if we get rid of that ego within ourselves, if we have discipline, I guess you could say, if we have willpower, we use the energy, we find states of gnosis, we can overcome that. Basically, you have this state within us, this ego, this thing that thinks it's our self. We have a false self in us that is formed by imitation. I think the word is, it's like the opposite of projection. It's introjection. We take on the characteristics of the people and society and things and personalities around us, and we create these false selves. But the ego is sort of it's like a pseudo-sentience made from our own energy. We've created this kind of tulpa, or like false self within ourselves, that thinks it's the real self. And this is what a lot of magical systems try to help us overcome, is to create new symbols and rituals to bust out of that closed system that we've become trapped in. And that's why chaos magic is kind of important, because we have the ability to transform ourselves. I think I say self-transformation a lot, and that's what that means. Basically, we have the ability to transform ourselves to become something more than what we are right now. We are able to become something else. We are able to actually, it's more of an adaptability to become something more. Our psyche is able to become anything, to adapt to anything. We are more versatile than a lot of other animals on the planet, and yet we are also the most vulnerable to this kind of mental parasite within us, this kind of thing that leeches off of us, this thing that wastes our energy with pseudo concerns and fake, like we worry about stupid shit like, reality television or winning the lottery or anything like that. It's not real. We worry about nationalism and going to church and like all of these things that we've created as human beings to keep ourselves from our true potential. It's amazing, and it's also kind of horrifying to know the truth about that, and what you have to do is just find a way to overcome it, So the ego is a big problem. Yeah. The ego is always going to rebel against any kind of spiritual advancement or, restoration of flow of energy in the self. So you have to be on guard and learn to, I guess one way of dealing with it is doing the shadow work, going into your past and finding out the places where you've been hurt and becoming conscious of them and learning to take the emotion from that and feel the emotion, and let yourself be able to be afraid or hurt, and feel the emotions of that, and not sublimate them or bury them in your unconscious, where they will fester and become this false self. So that's important. You have to do the shadow work. That's important. And then you can begin to, dismantle the ego. Ego death is important. We can short circuit the ego through various states of gnosis, right? Like trance states, ecstatic states, orgasmic states. Yes, I said it. Psychedelic states all have a way of short circuiting the ego. Now, in those states, you might have to deal with the things that you've repressed if you haven't done the shadow work. You know what I mean? You might encounter those parts of yourself that are still fake. You might have to deal with those things. So you have shadow work and gnosis states, which are good for breaking out of the ego. And it's usually why gnosis states are used in chaos magic to obtain a result, because that state is short-circuiting the ego, which is basically draining your energy. So it's important that you learn how to use those states to your advantage. I don't know, sit down, listen to some Terence McKenna. Some other people who have encountered gnosis states. Like, you look at people like, Terence McKenna, you look at people like Robert Anton Wilson, you look at people like Philip K. Dick, and yes, I just mentioned the three people that are the topic of a book called High Weirdness, which I'm reading, among other books that I'm reading right now. I'm reading Wetico by Paul Levy. I'm gonna probably reread The Mind Parasites by Colin Wilson. All of these things are related, though. These all have the ego, as part of the topic. And you might not like me saying this, but a lot of Scientology is actually the study of that same ego, that parasite within people. I'm not even going to go into that, but it's interesting to read if you're not taken by the organization of it. I'm not big on organization. I'm interested in a study of the ego, and it's probably the best study of the ego and its defenses, and like all of its tricks and traps and stuff like that. Pick up a copy of Dianetics. You'll start to understand, oh, they're talking about the ego here and how it sublimates trauma. But yeah, as far as a study of the ego goes, that's all I've read it for. Not necessarily to get interested in the space opera part of it. There you go. You have those different. There's a few books for you to read. I've also gotten interested in listening to the hemisync tapes, to like train the sides of your brain in order to be synced up. I'm not sure if that works, but I know that binaural beats actually works. You put one tone in one ear and a slightly different tone in another ear, and you can hear the vibration between them in the center of your head. It's pretty interesting. It's very cool. ASMR is also pretty good. A lot of people might not know that ASMR puts you in sort of a gnosis state. They don't know what that state is. You have the tingles, right? But I'm thinking that actually might help people towards achieving different states of gnosis and improving their mental health by kind of like, I don't know. Once you short circuit the ego, right, you begin to feel states outside of the ego. You start to feel the will, the actual energy within you. You have the clarity of mind that isn't burdened by trying to sublimate trauma all day long, which is why a lot of people feel tired. They're just so busy like pushing all that shit down under the surface that they're tired. They're tired of, and then they go to sleep and then they have nightmares, because they enter that subconscious or unconscious realm when they dream. That's why people with PTSD, they have nightmares, because all of that stuff gets sublimated instead of felt, right? And we're supposed to let the emotions flow through us. And the emotional body, right, the neurochemistry, is between the mind, the software, and the body, the hardware. So if you don't allow that to feel, you are only hurting your body in the long run. There's different kinds of therapy that can help you get rid of that part of that sadness that's hiding behind the waters of consciousness. So, I will have a much more laid out and planned video on this topic, but this is just me rambling about the ego. And that we need to find ways to short circuit it and dissolve it and transform it, actually. Transforming the ego into, it's just a mask. It's just a mask that we wear. It's not the true self. The true self is something beyond words, beyond light, beyond anything that we can imagine. It's a nothingness. It's the Kia. It's the Tao. It's unfathomable and it's infinite, and that's what we truly are, and that's what we need to become. So hopefully we can go on that journey together and become infinite, or more infinite, or we can become anything. We can transform ourselves into whatever we need to be, which is the whole point of chaos magic, is self-transformation into whatever you need to be in the moment, rather than being whoever you have been defined as. And I think, and I'm going to get into this really quick, and I think that's why there's this whole movement about gender identity, because it scares the people who believe that our gender identity is solid. Our identity should be solid. They're guarding the continuity of self is what they're trying to do, and they don't understand that the actual self, there's no gender to the actual true self. It's beyond, duality. It's beyond, the yin and the yang, basically. It's the dynamic. It's impossible. It's infinite. So they don't understand that by trying to defend people's, true quote unquote gender or whatever, they're only trying to defend the ego realm, but that's a topic for another day too. I think that's just interesting that the whole gender identity debate thing is just, I don't know. I consider myself to be non-binary. There you go. Yeah. So I will see you in the next vlog, or hopefully we'll have a podcast with some cool people, and we'll do something fun. But stay tuned, hopefully you're enjoying the content on this channel, and I'm working on essays. So I've got a ton of them, and I think I'm working on actually sitting down and writing out my thoughts. So we'll get to that. Take care, and I will see you in the future, and we will become more than ourselves in the future. All right, thanks for hanging out, and don't forget to hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe. If you watch the video, if you watch any of the other videos, please subscribe, because there will be more content, I promise.